Everyone. I'm here in the Gush. So 3 o'clock in the morning, a bit late, but it's great to see everyone again. So Bershut Rabbi M, just before we start, to thank Aunt Amy for sponsoring in memory of Saba and Safta. They were at AA many times, and of course, had steadfast commitment to Jewish education. So I'm sure they'll be spelling, looking down upon the whole family gathering, everyone gathering to learn some Torah tonight. But I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that Saba is a bit disappointed as there's no refreshments being served tonight. Secondly, just to thank Rabbi M for giving me the kavod to an opportunity to share some Torah tonight, and of course my dad, Robin David, for organizing it, for organizing the Learnathon and coordinating everything, and then just a shout out to my grandparents, Grandma and Pa, and my mom, and my siblings, and the rest of the family that's here. So just before we start, to set out some objectives. The first objective is, first of all, to share Torah between everybody. My goal is for it to be interactive, for the audience to be giving some suggestions. Secondly, to give everyone a bit of a taste of Eretz Yisrael, to give everyone a taste of Israel. It's been a little while since everyone's been here. So interwoven between the learning, there'll be some videos to help aid in the learning, and also to give everyone a taste of Eretz Yisrael. And then lastly, for everyone to just gain a bit of an understanding kind of methodologically of what we're doing in yeshiva, kind of the way we're learning, the structure of our learning day to day, and kind of like the methodology behind what exactly we're doing. So without further ado, I'll share my screen, and let's start. I hope everyone can see the screen. So just if everyone, if you give a thumbs up if you see the screen.
We're good.
Okay. Great. So my goal tonight is to discuss, show a concept it's brought down in the Gemara Pesachim, called Sholem V'Dorshim Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag. This idea of asking and inquiring 30 days before the Gemara Pesachim specifically says Pesach, asking about the halachot of the Chag, to learn the halachot of the Chag. And I thought, what better way to open up the Learnathon than exactly what we're doing now. It's not quite 30 days, but it is, before Pesach. Everyone's gathered for the next 2 weeks, hope Bezrat Hashem, into Pesach in order to be learning about Pesach, about Torah in general. So I thought, what better way than to kind of take a dive into this concept that the Gemara brings down to start learning 30 days before the Chag. So we'll move. Sweet. So the basis, the source, is found in Pesachim. The Gemara is involved in a discussion about about if you go on vacation, let's say, or you're leaving your house before Pesach. So how early, how much in advance of Pesach do you have to be burning your chametz? And the Gemara comes to the conclusion that 30 days before Pesach, you have to burn your chametz. So if you leave your house before 30 days before Pesach, you don't need to burn your chametz and check for chametz. If you leave within 30 days of Pesach, you have to burn your chametz. So the Gemara asks, Hani shloshim yom maya viditu, maya viditayu. What's this? Where do we get this 30 days from? It quotes a brisa. It says, Kiritanya sholem v'dorshim b'hilchot haPesach kodem haPesach shloshim yom. That we ask that there's this concept of being sholem v'dorshim, this funny language of like, it seems like a double language of asking and inquiring 30 days before Pesach about the halachot, about the laws of Pesach. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says 2 weeks, but that isn't the concern us that much tonight. And then the Gemara proceeds to ask, my time at the Tanakama, what's the reason for this idea of 30 days before. And the Gemara answers, Shahari Moshe Omed Pesach Rishon Umazir al Pesach Sheni. Moshe was stood up on the first Pesach and started giving over the halachot of the second Pesach. So just for some background, in the Midbar, in the desert, Moshe, it came first after the first year after Yetziat Mitzrayim, after the Jews left Egypt. It was time for Pesach, and Moshe got up and started, telling everyone about Pesach. And there was a group of people who were impure from a dead body, which precludes you from being able to bring the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice that you have to bring on Pesach. And these people, they came to Moshe and they said, "Look, we're impure, and we're not able to bring the Korban Pesach. So what are we really want to bring the Korban Pesach? What are we able to do?" And Moshe asked Hashem, and Hashem responded to him to tell the people that they can have a redo, basically a rerun. It's called a Pesach Sheni, a second Pesach, 30 days after the first Pesach, where they're able to bring the Korban Pesach, and they're able to fulfill their obligation of bringing the Korban Pesach. So the Gemara infers from this: Moshe got up on the first Pesach and told everyone the rules about the second Pesach, which was 30 days later. The Gemara is able to infer from this that 30 days before Pesach, you're supposed to start discussing the halachot of Pesach. So now let's kind of go more into it, find a deeper understanding here and ask some questions. Something that we do a lot in yeshiva, ask questions whenever we read a source, or uncover some form of halacha, some form of law. So we ask, what's the nature of this halacha? What's the reason behind this 30 days before? Why 30 days before? What's this idea of asking? What does that really mean? So that's the first question that I want to explore tonight. What's the nature of this halacha? The second is I want to explore the scope. Does it apply just on Pesach, or does it apply on all Chagim? That all Chagim we have to be learning about the holiday 30 days before. And the last thing is about the obligation. Is it an obligation? Do you have to be learning asking 30 days before the Chag, or is it merely just a suggestion that it's a nice thing to do? And then who is obligated, or who is this being directed towards? So let's start with the first question. What's the nature of Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag? What's the reason for it? 30 days. Does anyone have any suggestions? Why would it be 30 days? What's this idea of asking? What's its nature? I can't really see everyone because my screen is shared. So I guess maybe unmute yourself and speak if anyone has suggestions. No one? I hope you guys can all still hear me. Okay. No one has suggestions. So we'll jump. But suggestions are very, very much encouraged. So anyone has anything to say?
Alex,
we'll jump to the first. Yeah.
Perhaps it's because there are so many halachos that relate to Pesach. So you gotta start way in advance.
Very good. So Kiwi's hitting on an idea that we'll speak about a bit later. It's developed. Kiwi's kind of between two ideas, developed by the Ritva on the one hand, kind of, and also by Tosfos. Anyone have any other suggestions?
Does it have any?
Thank you. Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with the giving of the half a shekel 30 days before?
So it doesn't. Nowhere did I see in the sources that it had anything to do with the half a shekel. It may have to do though with the Korban Pesach. An interesting source, which we'll see in a bit. About the Korban Pesach, so it might have to do with the Korban Pesach. In any event, let's move forward. Okay, so we'll explore the first model which I want to develop. It's the model developed by the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim. He lived in the 1300s in Spain, and he's operating on what he sees from the Rif. He's commenting on the Rif. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. He lived in the 1000s. He's from Algeria. He's one of the early Ashkenazi poskim, and he poskins. He codifies all the Gemara as halacha. So he basically, when the Gemara lists, the Gemara is structured as kind of a conversation. So the Rif comes along and basically pulls out all the halachic points and codifies them. So here on the screen, the Rif, he codifies this idea of Sholem Lifnei Pesach, asking before Pesach, but he leaves out quite a critical word. He says, "Maya v'ditayu k'ditanya Sholem behilchot haPesach kodem haPesach shloshim yom." What does he leave out? He leaves out the word dorshim. He just says Sholem, asking, and not dorshim, not inquiring. What's going on here? So the Ran says he works from the fact that the Rif only mentions Sholem. He says it must mean the Tanya Sholem v'darshim b'dilchot haPesach kodem haPesach shloshim yom kilomar dechashvinan le Shoel ke'inyan v'kaimalan be'alma b'shnei talmidim shesholen echad Shoel ke'inyan ve'echad Shoel shelo ke'inyan shenizkakin l'shoel ke'inyan. The Ran basically says, what's this idea of 30 days before Pesach that you have to be asking and inquiring about the laws of Pesach? So it has to do with basically setting a time frame for when you're allowed to ask about Pesach. There's this idea, there's this halacha that you're only allowed to ask a rabbi about a question, if it's within the topic that the rabbi is dealing with at the time. So if the Rav is learning about the Hilchos Kashrus, he's learning about the halachos of the laws of keeping a kosher kitchen. So you shouldn't go ask him about the laws of an eruv, because the Rambam says you might come to embarrass him if he doesn't know the rules. So the Rif says within 30 days you're allowed to ask all the questions that you want about Pesach, and your questions are in fact prioritized. Let's say you have a question about Pesach and your friend has a question about Sukkot, and you both come to ask the Rav. So your question is prioritized because you're within the 30 days before Pesach, and therefore your question is prioritized. Okay, that's the first model. It's kind of a license to ask, to ask questions 30 days before, and a prioritization of the questions about Pesach. Now let's move to our second model, and in order to grasp the second model, we'll take a trip to the Kotel. Give me 1 second. Here we go. All right. Whoop. Oops. All righty.
I'd like to welcome you all to the roof of Oraita, overlooking the beautiful Har HaBayit, the site on which on Erev Pesach, hundreds of thousands of Jews would flock in order to sacrifice their Korban Pesach and eat it later that night. Why is this overlook of Har HaBayit at all relevant to our discussion of Shloshim Yom, Kodem Achad, Shol, and Kedoshim? Well, the Beit Yosef, the commentary on the Torah Shulchan Aruch, Siman Orach Chaim, Siman Taf Kaf Chet, quotes the Gemara Avodah Zarah, Daf Hamid Bet, where the Gemara is in a lengthy discussion regarding the prohibition of slaughtering a parent animal and the kid and the baby in the same day. And the Gemara is discussing that there are certain days when you have to have a heightened awareness to this prohibition, as there are many korbanot being sacrificed on this day, and the chance of you sacrificing the parent and the baby is a much higher likelihood. And over the course, in the middle of this discussion, the Gemara quotes the Mishnah of Hatnan Sholem behilchot haPesach kodem haPesach shloshim yom. Hey, we ask about the Hilchos Pesach. We learn Hilchos Pesach 30 days before Pesach. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Shtei Shabbatot, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no, you only do it 2 weeks. Anan deshlichi mumin de pasli afilu bedukin shaba'ayin va'inam tlatin yomin. The Gemara says that we Jews, we're very, very strict about the types of blemishes that can be on a korban. Even a slight nick in the eyelid of an animal is enough to invalidate a korban, to passel the korban for the in order to bring it to the mizbeach. You can't bring any korban on the mizbeach that has a blemish, even a slight nick in the eyelid, and therefore we need 30 days before the actual offering of the korban in order to constantly be checking it to ensure that there is no blemishes. Therefore, the Beis Yosef says, "Sholim v'darshim shloshim yom kodem achag." Why do we need to do this for the korban Pesach? Well, after all, we were bringing the korban Pesach, and therefore we need 30 days before, or to start 30 days before to check, start checking the lamb, start checking the korban Pesach in order to ensure there are no blemishes.
Alrighty. So as I hope everyone was able to hear from there, the second model that we developed is about checking the korban. This is what I was kind of mentioning to you, Pa. That the korban Pesach requires, because there's many korbanot being brought on the day of Pesach itself, so it's very possible that the blemishes will be overlooked. Therefore, you need 30 days before in order to check the korban Pesach. Okay. To move on to our third model of what could be the possible nature of Shoel and Vidorshim, of asking and inquiring 30 days before the Chag, we'll take a trip now to the Alon Shvut Makolet. Alrighty.
I'm standing here in the Alon Shvut Makolet to explore the Ritva's explanation behind the nature of the din Shoel and Vidorshim Shloshim Yom Kodem Achad. The Ritva explains the nature of this din is as such: Shoel and behilchot haPesach Kodem Pesach Shloshim Yom Hainu lidrosh berabim behilchotav mikan ve'elach kedei lezarzan. The Ritva explains that the nature of this din. Why do we start talking about the halachas of Pesach 30 days beforehand? It's in order to alert people of the fact that Pesach's coming and they need to prepare. The Beis Yosef, in his commentary on the Torah Shulchan Aruch, sharpens this point. Ve'od yesh lomar the dine Pesach al kol panim tzarich lehodiam la'am kodem Pesach shloshim yom kedei sheyiya lahem shehut rav le'yit'asek b'tchinat hatritim. Right, in order that people should be able to start grinding the grain, v'afiat matzah, and start baking matzah, v'agalat kelim, and start togeling their kelim, ubir chametz, and to start burning the chametz. The reason behind this din, the nature of the din, to start involving yourself in the hilchos of halachos of Pesach, is in order that people should be aware and should have enough time in order to prepare for the Chag, in order to buy your matzah, in order to buy your kosher Pesach cereal, in order to buy your kosher Pesach cookies, and of course, don't forget those chocolate mints. And last but not least, to give moschitim, to give money to poor people in order that they should have money for the Seder. It's all in preparation in order to alert people the fact that Pesach's coming and that they should have enough time to prepare.
Okay. So our third model is 30 days before. There seems to be some type of obligation upon the community leaders, the rabbis, to start talking about the halachos of Pesach in order to make people aware and give people enough time to start preparing for Pesach. There's much to do, and therefore you need 30 days beforehand in order to start making people aware. That's the third possible possibility of what Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag might be, according to the Ritva. For our final model, we'll take a trip now to actually where I'm sitting now in the Beis Medrash in Gush, but it's during the day, so there'll be more people around in order to see our fourth model of the possible nature of Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag. All right.
I'd like to welcome you into the Gush Beis Medrash, or as they say around here, Beit Midrash, in order to explore another model of the nature of the din Shloshim Yom Kodem Achad. This model happens to be Pshito Shel Mikra, in my opinion, the most simple understanding of the text, and it's found in Tosfos. But in order to do so, we have to go to the Gemara in Megillah Daf Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara here quotes a statement of Rabbi Shiur ben Levi. Amar Rabbi Shiur ben Levi, Purim shechal liot b'Shabbos shalom v'dorshin minyan shel yom. When Purim falls out on Shabbos, you still need to be learning the halachos of Purim on the day of Purim itself. This is something separate from the din of learning 30 days before, leading up to a Chag. The Gemara here is talking specifically about learning on the Chag itself. The Gemara asks, "My area Purim, afilu Yom Tov nam." What's so special about Purim? On Yom Tov, you also need to do this. The Tanya, Moshe tiken lahem Yisrael sheyushalom v'darshin b'nyan shel yom, hilchot Pesach b'Pesach, hilchot Aseret b'Atzeret, hilchot Chag b'Chag. Right, because Moshe was mitaking for Yisrael that they should be learning the halachos of the Chag on the day of the Chag itself. Again, something separate from the din that we're talking about. Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, 30 days before the Chag. This is an actual halacha that you have to be learning the halachos of the Chag on the Chag itself. And Tosfos your comments, my area Purim afilu Yom Tov nami, nearly the Hachi Perusha. My area Purim the Ein Dorshin Bo Mikodem Achein Shloshim Yom to Mishum Hachi Yesh Lidrosh Bo Bayom. Right. This is what Tosfos thinks it's saying. Right. What's so special about Purim? We're not Doresh 30 days before, and therefore we have to be Doresh. We have to be learning halachos on the day itself. So afilu b'Yom Tov the darshinan shloshim yom lefanav v'afilu hachi dorshim bo bayom the Tanya v'derem Hashem moadei Hashem. Even on Yom Tov, where we're learning 30 days before, so you also have to be Doresh. You have to be learning halachos on the day itself. What we see here from Tosfos is a direct comparison between the halacha of learning 30 days before the Chag to learning on the Chag itself. When the Gemara talks about learning on the Chag itself, it really means learning on the Chag, learning the halachos, opening a sefer, hearing a shiur. That's literally what it means. From the comparison of Tosfos of Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, Shol and V'Darshim, to the concept of learning on the Chag itself, it shows that Tosfos clearly thinks that the two are one and the same. Just Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag is extended for a longer period of time, where you actually have to be Shol and V'Darshim, actually learning the halachot 30 days before, learning, hearing a shiur about Pesach, hearing a shiur about Shavuos, opening a sefer 30 days before, and as such, the nature of Shol V'Darshim, Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, according to Tosfos, is actually to learn the halachot. It's not to ask questions if they might arise, like the Ran had said, or something about the preparations for the Chag, but rather an actual learning of the halachos, of learning of the topics of the Chag itself.
Okay. So to return to maybe something that Kivi said, or Kivi touched upon, we saw from Tosfos here that the idea of learning 30 days before is real learning. What we're doing tonight, what we're doing, the next 2 weeks into Pesach is really sitting down and hearing shiurim, opening the sefer. And as Kivi said, there's many halachot about Pesach that have to be learned. So 30 days before should give you enough time to prepare and to really learn all those halachot. Okay, so now that we've developed our 4 models, just to quickly go over them. Model number 1 was that of kind of Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag defines a time frame for us in which we're given license to ask all of our questions about Pesach, and our questions about Pesach are given priority. Model 2, it provides a time frame of 30 days before the Chag, when we're supposed to start checking our Korban Pesach, making sure there's no blemishes. Model 3, a kind of call to preparation to announce to everyone that 30 days before the Chag we're supposed to start learning, in order that everyone should be made aware that Pesach is coming and they have to start preparing. And model 4 is really to sit down and start learning about Pesach 30 days before Pesach. Okay, so now I want to move on to what we call in yeshiva, we call it nafka minot. There are types of basically applications. What we do is we take what we know about the models that we've built, about the nature of the halacha, and we go and apply it to different situations and see based on the nature, what does that tell us in a certain situation. And so the 2 kind of situations that I want to discuss tonight is that of scope. does this halacha of Sholem v'Darshim Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, does it apply on all Chagim? Does it apply on Sukkot, Shavuos, Pesach as well? All the three regalim, or does it only apply on Pesach? Is it specific to Pesach? And as you mentioned before, who is obligated, the nature of the obligation. Let's first focus on scope. So to start with our model number one, the Rambam quotes this idea of only asking a rabbi about the question, within the topic that he's learning. He quotes it within the general halachot, the general laws of learning Torah. He quotes it in general Hilchot Talmud Torah, which seems to imply that this idea of a license to ask 30 days before all your questions about Pesach, it seems to be kind of a general law within Talmud Torah, within learning Torah, and therefore there should be nothing specific to Pesach, right? Every Yontiv, 30 days before, that's the time frame where you have to ask all your questions about that Yontiv. To move on to model two, we're now going to take an adventure to the dairy farm in Rosh Sirim in order to continue to explore the scope, whether it only applies on Pesach or it applies on all other Yamim Tovim as well. Alrighty.
I'd like to welcome you into the Rosh Sirim Dairy Farm. Say hello to our friends the cows, to explore our first nafkamina, which is the scope of the halacha Sholem v'Darshim Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag. Does it apply merely on Pesach alone, or does it extend to all other Shalosh Regalim as well, Sukkot and Shavuos as well? And I'd like to explore this within our second model that we developed, the model that we developed in Gemara Avodah Zarah, regarding B'dikat HaKorban, regarding checking the Korban 30 days before, leading up till Pesach, in order to check for blemishes and to make sure you have a completely clean Korban Pesach to bring on the Mizbeach. Well, this is actually subject to a machloket. Tosfos and the Beis Yosef quotes it as well, versus the Gra. Let's jump into it. Tosfos on Avodah Zarah, he talks about the Hatnan, Sholin Behilchot HaPesach. Afal Pisha Gam Ata, Shein Korban, right? Even though nowadays we don't have a Korban, Sholin Behilchot HaPesach, Kodem Shloshim Yom, Mikol Makom, right? So even though we don't have a Korban now, we still need to be Sholin in Pesach 30 days before. So Mikol Makom, Ikarat Akana, Ala Korban Nitkina. Dika Amar Taima be Parakama de Pesachim Shahari Navi Omeid be Pesach Rishon Umazir al Pesach Sheni. Right, even though the main takana was made on the Korban Pesach, so the takana continues to exist even nowadays when we don't have the Korban Pesach. However, what's notable from his words is that he does not at all diverge from this concept of Sholin B'Darshin B'Hilchot HaPesach. He talks nearly only about Pesach, seemingly to imply that he only thinks that this halacha of Sholem v'Darshim, Shloshim Yom, Kodem HaChag, applies by the Korban Pesach. It only applies by the Korban Pesach. You only need to check the Korban Pesach 30 days before, leading up till Pesach. And by all other Chagim, you don't need to check the Korbanot starting 30 days before. However, the Gra, on his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, has something else to say. The Gra says, the Apagav, the Beparakama, the Avodah Zarah, Amrinan Mishum Korban Pesach. Even though that when it was talking about Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag in Avodah Zarah, it was talking specifically about the Korban Pesach. However, Huadin Mishum Korbanot Chagiga. It also applies to the Korbanot Chagiga, the Korban that you bring on Pesach, on Shavuos and Sukkot as well, and on Pesach. This is a Korban. It was a shlamim. It was brought with cows, possibly, or with other animals, in order to show thanks to Hashem. So, according to the Gra, in the second model that the Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag is because of the Dika, is because of checking the Korban, he thinks that, yeah, this should also apply to all other Korban Chagigo as well, which means that here our friends the cows are not so safe. Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, we start watching them, we start making sure that there's no mumim in order that on Pesach and also Sukkot and Shavuos, that we're able to bring them on the Chag itself. So just a quick recap. The second nafkamina regarding the scope, with our second model of Bedikat HaKorban, of checking the Korban 30 days before the Yantiv, according to Tosfos, this only applies to the Korban Pesach. It only applies to checking the lamb 30 days before. These cows are totally fine. According to the Gra, however, it applies on all Yamim Tovin regarding the Korban Chagiga as well, which would mean that we'd have to start checking these cows, making sure they don't develop any moment.
Okay. So now that we've clarified that, first of all, it's the nicest view I've ever seen from a cow farm before. And so, yeah, just to summarize, right, the B'dikat HaKorban in our second model, like we said, either you could hold like the Tosfos that's just on Pesach, it just applies to the Korban Pesach that you have to check 30 days before, or every Yom Tov you have to check the Korban Chagiga 30 days before. Okay, let's move on to our third model. The call to preparation, we're show of the Doresh in order to make people aware. The Beis Yosef speaks it out explicitly that on Pesach you have, quantitatively much more to prepare than all other Chagim, and therefore it just applies on Pesach. Only on Pesach do you have to start talking about the laws 30 days before, because only on Pesach you have so much preparation to do. And in our fourth model of Talmud Torah, Rashi says it explicitly in Bava Kama. He says, "Ba'in lishmo hilchot haregel kodem haregel shloshim yom." If the whole idea of shloshim yom of 30 days before is to start learning the halachot, so it should apply to every single chag, right? Rashi doesn't differentiate. He says just on the regel itself, on whichever shalosh regalim, whichever Sukkot, Shavuos, or Pesach, you have to start learning 30 days before. So 30 days before, it applies to every Yom Tov. Okay, as a brief summary, but in the interest of time, we'll skip that. The second nafkamina I want to explore is that of the obligation itself. Who's obligated? Is this really an obligation that you have to start asking and inquiring, learning or checking your korban 30 days before? And if so, who's obligated in it? So in our first model, the Ritva says it. He says straight out, Rishut l'talmid lish'ol, that if you happen to have a question within the topic of Pesach, so 30 days before, as we've defined the time frame of 30 days before, you're allowed to ask your questions and you get priority. This makes it seem like it's granting you permission. If you happen to have a question, you're allowed to ask it, but there's no obligation. And to whom does this apply? Well, to anyone with questions. Within the second model of checking the korban 30 days before, so it appears from Tosfos that this should apply to anyone who has korban Pesach, which means everybody. Everyone's required to check their korban Pesach 30 days before. And therefore, it's an obligation, and it applies to everyone. And Tosfos deals with the fact that, well, today we don't have a korban Pesach, so what are we supposed to do? So Tosfos says, even though the original 30 days was decreed because of the korban Pesach, so the decree continues to extend into today, into contemporary times, where even though we don't have a korban Pesach, we still need to be asking and learning the laws 30 days before. It's an obligation for everybody. Within our third model, to kind of that the leaders of the community should start talking about the laws of Pesach in order to make people aware to start preparing. So it seems to be an obligation, but it's not an individual obligation. It's only an obligation on the leaders, on the rabbis, in order to make the people aware that they should then start preparing 30 days in order to give them enough time, 30 days before the holiday, 30 days before Pesach, in order to give them enough time to prepare. And our last model, the model of Talmud Torah, that 30 days before you're supposed to start really learning Torah. So here there's a machloket, there's a debate. The Yerushalmi says that that on the Chag itself, on the holiday itself, you're supposed to learn the halachot of that Chag. But the Beit Avad shoalim kodem l'shloshim yom. You're supposed in the base medrash, in the yeshiva and the seminaries, you're supposed to start learning 30 days before. So he says, granted, there's an obligation to start studying Torah 30 days before. However, it's only upon those in yeshivas, those in seminaries, those really in the environment of Torah. However, the Balachos Gedolos, and it's quoted in the Shiltos as well, have a totally different opinion. They say Mekaymi Pischa B'Tzlas and Yomin Mibayle LiYisrael LeMigmar LeMilei Pischa. That 30 days before, it's upon every single person in Am Yisrael. In order, every Jew is supposed to start learning about the laws of Pesach. It's supposed to start really, studying, going to Shiurim and learning about Pesach. And I think this makes sense as well, just from the root of where does this halacha come from? Where does this idea come from of learning 30 days before? After all, it comes from the Jews in the Midbar. It comes from the nation, those people who so wanted to serve Hashem that they could have just said, "Oh, easy out. We're impure we're impure from dead people. We're not able to bring the Korban Pesach in the first Pesach, and therefore, all right, we'll do it next year." But they so wanted to bring the Korban Pesach, they so wanted to serve Hashem that they went to Moshe and they asked, "Can we bring the Korban Pesach?" So out of their desire to serve Hashem arose this idea of asking 30 days, learning about the halachos 30 days before the Chag as a kind of demonstration of serving Hashem and of getting close to Him. So just to summarize, we had four models. The first one was that of that Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag is kind of defines a time frame when you're able to ask questions about Pesach. It applies to any yontiv. 30 days before any yontiv, you're allowed to ask questions, and it's voluntary. Whoever wants to ask a question can ask a question, but there's no obligation. Model 2 was that of checking the korban. 30 days before, you're supposed to check your korban. This was subject to a machloket between the Gra and the Tosfos. Tosfos says it applies only by the Korban Pesach. There's so many Korban Pesach being offered that you need 30 days in order to really make sure that there's no, to weed out all blemishes. Whereas the Gra says no, even on the other Yomim Tovim, there's also lots of korbanot being offered on other Yomim Tovim, and therefore you have to check the korban 30 days before the other Yomim Tovim as well. And this is obligatory to everybody because everyone has a Korban Pesach. Our third model, that of to start Shol and Vidorshim in order to make people aware to start preparing for Pesach, only applies to Pesach, and it's the obligation on all the leaders to start making people aware in order to call them to preparation. And our fourth model, that of actually studying Torah 30 days before the Chag, this applies to all Yomim Tovim. It's machlokes between Yerushalmi and the Balachos Gedolos and the Shiltos regarding whether it only applies to those people learning in yeshivas and environments of Torah, or it applies to the whole nation. And we thought, really, it makes more sense that it would apply to the whole nation, as after all, this whole idea of Shol and Vidorshim, of asking, arose from the Jews in the Midbar, their desire to serve Hashem. We should all be zocha to such a desire to serve Hashem, and Chag Kasher V'Sameach.